Hi, welcome to With Bowl and Spoon. My guest today is Ben from Unified Fields. Would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ben Buchanan from Unified Fields. I am a butcher of over 20 years now. Been a butcher pretty much my entire adult life. And I got into it, honestly, just needed a job that paid a little better than the convenience store I was working in. And I learned pretty quick how much of a art there was to the trade. And it was just really fulfilling work that, fed people and is really a steady career path, and I've always been able to get a job being a butcher no matter where I went in the country, and so I've been doing that for the past 20 years leading up to the pandemic. I had been building a mobile processing rig, just kind of on my own dime and with what little time I had up at my buddy's farm in West Virginia. But when COVID hit and the meat industry got turned on its head, I decided I really needed to do something to accelerate the project. So I went out and got an investment to finish building the rig and do some marketing and stuff to get my name out there, and started running around doing mobile processing for farmers in the area, where I'd go out with the crane truck and the refrigerated cooler and slaughter them on site and just leave everything there. It could plug in right at the farm. So when the farmer sold his meat or, he kept it himself, they could say this animal was born on the farm, raised on the farm, processed on the farm, and the first time it leaves is like in your cooler, which is good because a big gripe a lot of farmers have is they don't really have much oversight on their processing. When they drop the cow off or the pig or whatever at the slaughterhouse, goes in there and they don't know what happens to it after that. And a lot of them, complain they're not getting their meat back that they sent in. This on-farm system is they have complete oversight of everything and can see the whole process from beginning to end to really give them a perspective of how much work goes into it. And also the other big part is if they have the right composting setup on the farm, all the byproduct from processing animals, like the guts and the hide and the bones and everything like that, is amazing compost that when you break it down properly, it adds tons of nutrients back to the soil, and all that stuff should get returned back to the farm where it came from to continue that regenerative cycle. The idea is just giving farmers more access to processing and more oversight on what they're doing. But I realized pretty quick when I was going out there running around, my tiny little trailer butcher truck was, making a difference, but it is just a tiny little sliver of difference in this industry that has gotten so consolidated and so much control is taken by the big four packers, which everybody knows, most of the names anyway: Tyson and Cargill, JBS, National Beef, and more than half of those companies are foreign owned, and the other half are just such giant conglomerates that they all are pretty much in cahoots with each other and control the market, which is leaving farmers high and dry, not being able to be profitable with their operations, and leaving consumers high and dry paying outrageous prices for meat, all the while they're exporting at record rates, which is just driving up everybody's price even more. So that mobile rig thing, I was like, you know what, this is great, but I really need to do something to make a bigger difference in the industry. So I really started leaning into the whole training and developing butcher skills and everything, because I could go out there and do a little bit on my rig, doing a couple animals at a time, or I could use the knowledge I have between my ears and try and train as many butchers as I can to really make a bigger difference on the industry, because that's what we need right now, especially with the Biden administration putting all this money into building up a more competitive and resilient meat processing system. A lot of these small meat processors and new meat processors are getting this funding now and just having staffs that have no skill, and it makes it really difficult for them to be profitable. So for about the past year and a half now, I've been doing a lot of on-site training all across the country. I've been in Oklahoma and New York and South Dakota and North Carolina, and all farmers almost all of them have been farmers that are just fed up and wanted to start their own processing because they just didn't have any other market channels for their stuff. And just go in there, training them hands-on in the business, the skill, the management parts of it. And then our keystone project is here at Community Kitchen Pittsburgh, where about 2 years ago, I started teaching an intro to butcher class in there, just embedded into their overall culinary apprenticeship certification program. And it's just been so popular. We've been just growing it since then. I mean, we started with just a butcher block and a couple knives, and now we have a full meat processing room upstairs with all the commercial equipment, and we can cut, cure, smoke anything and make a bunch of good specialty products and everything like that. But this has kind of been where we're like serving our residency, we'll say, where I'm here a lot of the time teaching students cutting meat for their retail program. And we recently just got a grant through the Appalachian Regional Commission to build out a fully registered apprenticeship program. So I'm building out the curriculum now that will register with the Department of Labor. And when they go through this 2,000-hour program, they'll come out with a certificate at the end that'll show them that they can show to employers that gives them some credibility in the field. So,
congratulations on that.
Thank you. And that Power Arc grant we got, which is going to pay for us to build out this curriculum and then start training a butcher manager for Community Kitchen Pittsburgh here that will basically take the reins and doing what I'm doing right now and then become the trainer. And so the way it's written for the first year, we're going to have 2 apprentices every 3 months come in and then cycle back out in a 6-month window. So like the first 3 months we'll get 2, the next 3 months we'll get 2, the next 3 months we'll get 2, and 2 will graduate into on-the-job training, which we have a couple butchers in the pipeline that really want those skilled apprentices to go to their place when they come out. That's exciting that, we'll have a training program and immediate job placement for folks. And the butchers that I'm talking to that have shops, that is their number one problem right now, is getting and maintaining skilled labor. It's a very, very high skill industry. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have skills, you're just going to not make money. It's, you have to be efficient and clean. Yield has to be right for you to make good money. And if you don't know what you're doing, you end up destroying a lot of meat and missing a lot of stuff. And
I imagine there's potential for injury as well.
Well, yeah, definitely. Everything in this business is designed to cut and disassemble stuff. So if you're not really trained on all the equipment and safety procedures and stuff, it's easy to get pretty hurt pretty quick. But luckily, knock on wood, we haven't had any injuries here other than maybe like a little cut finger or something like that. But considering we have all the big industrial commercial equipment here, I emphasize safety and doing it the right way, as slow as you have to first, and then the speed will come. That's my biggest advice to folks, is like, don't try and be fast right out of the gate. Just do it properly, as slow as you need to, and then your muscle memory will start to build up, and then you can do it in your sleep.
Is that a butcher pun, muscle memory?
No, I never thought of it that way, but it is. So much of this business is muscle memory, because there's a lot of different techniques and ways you got to turn your knife and your wrist and move the meat and everything.
We all know cows are big, but the first time I saw like a sheeps are huge. They're not cute little lambs.
Yeah,
and pigs too are a lot larger than I think people imagine
Pigs are very dense too. I think the pig is it's like a snake with legs. It's just all muscle and solid, and if it wants to go somewhere and you're in its way, you're not going to stop it. They're pretty stout critters, and they do yield heavy carcasses, which we cut everything here at Community Kitchen Pittsburgh. We're a complete nose to tail butchery, so we're buying in quarters of beef and half hogs and things like that, which a half hog weighs 105 pounds and a quarter beef can weigh like 200 pounds. So try and team lift that one.
That's a quarter
of a cow.
Yeah, that's
usually we'll get it broken down a little bit more. The quarter consists of the chuck and the rib sections, And so we'll usually break those two apart to make it a little easier because, you know, I'm getting old now. I don't like carrying big, heavy stuff. My back doesn't like it.
You talked about the 4 big conglomerates that own most of our meat, that process most of the meat in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Say 4 or 5.
It's 4 when
Okay.
you're talking about beef. If you roll in pork into it, there is 5. Smithfield Foods, which had been the American household name in pork for like almost a century. Back in, I think, 2013, was bought by WH Group, which is 100% Chinese-backed company. So, like, Smithfield is 100% owned by China now.
So for our listeners, people who might not know, who haven't studied this industry, what is the problem? I mean, we did realize it during pandemic that the problem of these mass scaled up meat processing systems in the country is that if one part of the system, the distribution or the transportation or any of those parts fail, then you have waste.
Yeah.
And then it's this emergency. So I think during pandemic, we realized that. But like in general, if everything's operating properly, what is the problem with that kind of system?
I mean, it's just exploitive on so many different levels. You're not living in symbiosis with your environment. Like if you have a regenerative cycle, all the manure that comes out of the back end of the animal is evenly dispersed naturally across the land to make more nutrient dense soil, which creates more bugs, which creates more birds, and just the ecology just lives.
Bugs in the way that we like bugs, not,
yeah.
not a problem bug. Yeah.
Yeah. But the issue is with the factory farming and things like that there's so many animals crammed into a small space that manure is a liability, not an asset. And so you end up with like waste lagoons that create
manure lagoons. It sounds so lovely.
Yeah, and it's creates a lot of bad gases, and then also when it rains real bad, they overflow, and then all that stuff ends up in waterways. So it's like 1-2 environmental punch in that fact, and it's really, especially with the chicken industry and the pork industry, there's not many independent producers out there anymore. It's usually a farmer that takes out huge loans to build a chicken house, to get a contract with Tyson, and then they are just under the thumb of Tyson and their whole tournament system that they have that pits farmers against each other, and they're holding all the risk and liability for the operation, and Tyson makes all the money because they provide the birds, and then they take the birds and you just get a little check for however many birds that you were able to keep alive through the process. And
so the farmers are big eggs bitches,
basically. Yeah, they're and they entice them with all these like lucrative numbers on contracts and everything, but then once you finally get involved, there's all these like pitfalls and loopholes that it's like, oh, you didn't produce enough, so like you get docked.
There's all these gotchas.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's exploitive in that way, where it's exploiting the farmer and chipping away at their equity. If they own the land, it's been on their farm for generations or whatever, their equity just kind of keeps getting chipped away at it because you're not profitable every year and end up having to parcel off or sell stuff and
going into debt with equipment and stuff too.
Yeah. And then the younger generation looks at it like, wow, my granddad or dad or whatever has been busting his ass and hardly making anything on this. Why would I want this? So they don't want to take it over, and then the farmer ends up selling the farm off, and the only people that can afford land right now are giant corporate development companies, hedge funds, and they're buying up the land to either build townhomes on it, or like out west especially, they're buying up land specifically for water rights because they know that's going to be the next big thing that is going to be the hot commodity. So everybody from like Saudi Arabia to China to the Vatican is buying huge parcels of land out west right now just to like sit on water rights and play that card whenever people are desperate enough to pay out the ears for that land for the water or just for water in general. Like
it's a terrifying thought.
So it's unfortunate to see that so many farmers in recent years have gone bankrupt or just going out of business because they just don't want to do it anymore because it's not profitable. Because like I said, these development companies, they're not making food on that land anymore. They're building townhouses that are built very cheaply, and they're charging out the ears. I come past my folks up in Butler County, and it's just everywhere, all around Cranberry and in the region around there is just townhouse after townhouse that they put up so fast with the cheapest materials, and then charge like in the 400,000s for it. And it's like, you know, looks like it's going to get blown over by a strong wind. But
so on the mobile processing facility that you have, do you do all kinds of animals? You mentioned beef.
I do mainly beef because that is of the livestock farmers that are out there. Cattle producers are kind of the last standing independent producer out there, because, you know, the chicken industry's been chickenized and the pork industry's been chickenized. Like, there's not many independent producers out there that do anything at like any kind of scale where, you know, they are making much money at it. You know.
So what do you mean by chickenized? Because I figured you were going to go with the pork industry has been porkized.
Well, no,
chickenized.
Chickenizing the industry has been a term that's coined.
Oh, I had never heard that before. Okay,
oh no,
please
so when you chickenize the industry, they say that when it means that it's become so consolidated and all the independent producers have been pushed out. So there is no like open, transparent marketplace for that anymore. So there is no price discovery, and there's no way to like set a standard of price for that product. So what you have happen is you have these giant, you know, corporate contract growers, or just the vertically integrated growers that are owned by the whole company, and they just have so much control over the market because they control the production side and they control the processing and retail side. So they set the prices at whatever they want. And so it happened with the chicken industry first because of Tyson and their whole campaign. And that's pretty well known. But then in the 90s, it happened with the pork industry. You know, Smithfield and a couple other bigs came in and just steamrolled the industry and made the bottom drop out on the live pork industry. So like it went from farmers being able to sell their pigs for like $1.90 or $2 something per century weight, or 100 pounds is like how most animals are sold by the 100-pound marks, to like cents per pound. And so I know one farmer in Indiana, Greg Gunthorpe, and he's a huge advocate for the industry and trying to fight against these corporate powerhouses. He was saying in the 90s, he had to sell off his herd of pigs for less than what his grandfather was selling pigs for during the Great Depression, because so much consolidation had happened that they were able to just drop the industry out and take those losses until all the little processors or the little producers got pushed out of the business. And so then they say the pork industry got chickenized because that was the same exact thing that happened to the chicken industry. And now they're pushing for the beef industry. They really are trying to push the last remaining independent ones out there. And there's very, very little price discovery as it is now. There's a handful of auction houses across the country that still do like enough volume and have fair enough prices that kind of, you know, can set that market price to be determined. But overall, it's all speculation, like the stock market. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange, they set feeder cattle prices and they set live cattle prices. Nothing is truly reflective of what it costs to actually raise the animal, or anything that's truly involved in the fundamentals of raising the animal. It's all just like crypto speculation almost nowadays, where, you know, you have all these giant hedge funds buying cattle contracts for future months only to sell them off before that contract comes to maturity, because none of these hedge funds actually want to take delivery of any of these cattle because they don't have means to process them or anything. They just want to buy and sell and make money, and know that the industry is controlled by so few that if they got the insider track, then they can just do what they please. And the beef industry, I mean, I'm convinced they're probably like one of the oldest monies in this country, like even older than pharma and other types of ag. Like the livestock industry is really old money, and
the Wild West.
Yeah, and very, very corrupt, and has been for a long, long time. I mean, it was 100 years ago when it was like Swift and Armour and Wilson were the companies, and it was 5 back then that were controlling the entire industry. Now it's 4, but 100 years ago, they had such control of the market that the same things are happening now, where the government had to step in and break them up because it was getting so out of hand. And now it's starting to get out of hand again, but I don't see the government really stepping in to make much of a difference. It's got to come from the people.
That's the regionalizing meat production that I believe Joe Butte talked about on this podcast, about how there's a grocery store chain in east part of Pennsylvania who is having their cattle raised on farms.
Yeah.
They're having herds of cows being put on different farms around, and that's the way that they can control the price, is they're raising their own cows and they're making sure that they're being kept together, and so there's less stress, and so like the meat is going to be better quality. Mm-hmm. How can they make sure that their system doesn't get chickenized?
I think by, number one, keeping out any of the wolves that are the bigs that want to come in and just buy up your operation because they see you as competition. If you start getting too big, they'll take you in, which if they get big enough, that will be an option presented to them. There will be an acquisition offer on the table, I am sure, because that's just what they do, is they go in and they buy up any of the competition so they can control it. They might keep all the branding. Like, you go into a grocery store nowadays, you see so many different hundreds and hundreds of brands of meat on the shelf, but it's all owned by those 4 companies. They just keep the branding of that so it has the illusion of choice.
That'd be pretty cool to regionalize our meat production.
Yeah.
I hope it happens.
As long as we stay vigilant and don't let this movement fizzle out, this local meat movement, which I already see it starting to fizzle some, just because of the way the economy is now. It used, when there was a lot of money flying around post-pandemic and stuff, and people had money and savings and everything, people could more easily say, okay, I'm going to source local meat that's a little bit more money.
I'm going to pay $20 for a chicken versus $2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just by virtue of, people's pockets tightening, that movement's fizzling a little bit. But there's just more and more news coming out every week of antitrust settlements with the big packers and recalls because there's adulterated product from these big packers. And so they're still kind of in the spotlight for all their messed up stuff they're doing, but we just got to keep on keeping on with educating people of why it's important to buy local and keep your money in the community. It was almost 2 years ago now, I think, but I think it was Hormel had a recall for 91 tons of bacon bits. And I was like, I don't even know, what would 91 tons of bacon bits look like? It would fill a warehouse.
That's a really light product.
Yeah. Small, local, regional, you definitely have more oversight, more quality control. If something happens or you screw up the process or something, you're not affecting tens of thousands of pounds of meat at a time. It's like a couple hundred pounds of meat or something.
And people.
I
think that's really, and how do you reach them? So the animals that you process on your truck, your mobile, say it again?
Mobile processing unit or mobile beef processing
MPU.
unit.
Yeah. So
I just call it the rig, basically.
The rig.
The rig.
So you do exclusively cows, or do you also do pigs?
I'll do some pigs and lambs too. No chickens,
lambs.
Because you need a whole different setup for that with the scalder and plucker and all
remover,
that stuff. Yeah. But I've done just super small scale, a dozen birds on my buddy's farm just for him, or doing a couple rabbits on a farm or something. But mainly doing beef and some pigs, but really a lot of people want all that value added stuff with pigs, which on the mobile setup, it's logistically challenging because you gotta slaughter the pig, let it hang to chill, come back, break it, cut all your fresh cuts out of it, package it, label them, put them in the container, and then take all your smoked product, cure it, let it cure for a while, then smoke it, then process and package that, and it's just a lot extra stuff to do. So
can you do all of that on your rig?
I can't do
Oh, okay.
smoking and curing and stuff. I don't have a smokehouse or
But you can
anything like
do
that. But I can do
the
it here.
curing
Yeah.
upstairs. Can you do the
Yep.
smoking upstairs here?
We have a little smoker that we roll outside, but it's more for like research development now, and hopefully in the next couple months here we'll be ready to buy a big like real smokehouse that we can do more than a ham or two at a time in.
Tell me about the name of your organization, Unified Fields.
So it's got a couple different meanings. Obviously, I'm trying to bring farmers together to take more control of their processing and have a little more oversight, and unify them to have more market power so they are profitable and we're not losing farmland like crazy. So that's kind of the first meaning of Unified Fields, is like bringing farmer fields together to make them more powerful. But I've always been super into physics, particle physics, general relativity, quantum electrodynamics, and all kinds of fringy science stuff. And the unified field theory is the elusive thing in physics where they can't quite make the real physical macro world that we live in, which is everything that we see and feel and all that. They can't make it mesh well with like the quantum super tiny world. So like the general relativity and quantum relativity just like don't go well together. There's a lot of things that we observe in the macro world that when you get down to such tiny particles, they don't follow the same rules of physics and everything. And especially like light is an insane phenomenon, that it's like a particle as well as a wavelength. Pretty cool experiment they did back a long time ago called the double slit experiment, where they basically like shot photons or packets of light through two slits. And if you're just throwing tennis balls through those two slits, they would just form two little strips of like tennis ball marks on the wall on the other side of those two slits. But when you put light through it, that light, even if you put one photon at a time through those slits, it'll create an interference pattern. So like an interference pattern, if you drop a stone into a pond, that ripple effect, if you drop another stone next to it, where the ripples clash together and cancel each other, and where they work together to make an even stronger wave, that's the interference pattern that's like created on the wall. So what happens with light is it'll make that interference pattern when nobody's observing it, but if you are observing it, it changes its behavior to not make the interference pattern, because it's just light does weird things.
Does light
like
have
that.
Consciousness? Is that what's happening?
I mean,
it's like, oh, you didn't see that.
Yeah, you can't look at me. No, I think it's our observation has effect on things at like the quantum level.
That is wild.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things like in the universe that can't be explained with general relativity, like, the spiral arms of a galaxy. We observe the spiral arm of the galaxy, the whole galaxy is spinning at the same rate, whereas if it was explained through just regular general relativity, the center of the galaxy would be spinning faster, and as you got out farther, like the farther would just trail behind and not be spinning as quick.
Yeah.
And so they try and explain away
That's
a lot
how
of
things
that.
happen here on Earth.
Yeah, yeah. And so they try and explain a lot of that away with things like dark matter, saying like there's some mysterious other energy out there that is, making the rest of that galaxy move as fast as the rest, but they never can observe dark matter. And they've been spending billions, like with the Large Hadron Collider and stuff, trying to figure it out, but they just keep coming up with more questions.
So the name is part physics, part mission.
Yeah. So the logo is the Greek for phi, which is the golden ratio, which is 1.618, which is what like every living thing's structure is based off of, from trees, how they split from the trunk to a branch to a twig to like the tip of your finger. If you take that length and multiply it by 1.618, you get this, and if you take that length and multiply it by 1.618, you get the length of your hand.
And that's how you explain the fingertip to fingertip with your outstretched fingers is the same as your height.
Yeah, and like the Fibonacci spirals and things like that are all, and so much art and music and everything is based on that ratio, 1.618. And so I kind of took that symbol and slapped a couple leaves on it and made that the logo. And I made it not meat specific, like there's no cow head or anything like that, like a lot of butcher places have, because I feel like it's not just an animal agriculture problem with consolidation and losing farmland to giant corporations and stuff. It's all foods and commodities and everything. So if I do good with the meat end of it and can help change the world a little bit with that, then I'd like to get into like helping other farmers with the same issues and then eventually parlay that into 0 point energy, free energy stuff. 2050.
So the other part of this business is the apprenticeship program. So I'm curious, you're training young folks,
young
folks,
and old folks, whoever's interested in the trade. Like I said, we've been doing the Intro to Butcher class here for a couple years now, and it is just like a really brief overview of the butcher industry, meat quality and characteristics to like look out for as a chef or in the culinary industry. Like a little bit of the history and how animals go from being born to your dinner plate.
So that's been part of the chef curriculum here at Community Kitchen Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and people really like everybody wants to come to the butcher class so bad. All the newbies that come in, they're like, when are we going to take butcher class? And it's like, you got to hit tier 3 first, and then you'll get in there. But this apprenticeship program is going to be like that butcher intro class on steroids. It's going to be fully immersive.
So it hasn't started yet. When does that?
No, we are trying to get our manager, who I'm going to be training directly, to pretty much take over the program, hopefully in a year or so. We got onboarding and stuff this week with him. And then once he's, kind of settled in, then we're going to start bringing in apprentices for on-the-job training. And it won't be a full, registered apprenticeship yet, because we still have to, submit all the paperwork to the Department of Labor and go through the motions with all that. But we're still going to bring people in and train them as if it was fully, certified and everything.
And what sort of places are you going to place them? Do you have
other little small butcher shops around the area here? I'm great friends with Abdul Salim in the Strip District, and I've worked in so many other small butcher shops all around the region, and every single one of them would be like, yeah, if you got somebody who knows what they're doing, send them our way, because it's desperation mode for most butcher shops right now. A big problem is a lot of these butcher shops are operating at capacity right now. Since the pandemic, there's just such a huge demand for local meat compared to what it was pre-pandemic, and so a lot of these butcher shops are just trying to keep their head above water with keeping up with stuff and everything. And the problem is you can't hire somebody that's completely green and train them in that environment, because then everybody just gets in the weeds and gets behind. Because you have to really slow down and show people how to do it the right way and reinforce the right way to do it, which takes a lot of time, and shops just don't have that kind of time right now. They would rather just keep going full steam ahead with what they got until the wheels fall off, basically, is how most of them explain it, and just go from there. But if they had somebody that was skilled and experienced, they could just plug right in and say, okay, cut this stuff up and tell me if you need anything. I'll be over here doing my job.
That makes a lot of sense.
That'll make a huge difference for a lot of them. So
that's really exciting. Really excited for you. How long could someone be a butcher? It's a lifelong career, right? Yeah. That's always going to be in demand, and that's
unless something catastrophic happens with the meat industry. I don't think meat or the demand for meat is going anywhere anytime soon. They're trying to artificially suppress the demand for meat with all the stuff you hear about cow burps being the reason that the planet's
going to shit cows,
and stuff. There's a pretty big campaign against animal agriculture right now, and I'll say that we do need to do something with the way that we're raising all food, especially animals right now. But doing away with it completely is just not a good idea. The vegan movement and the climate movement and everything that's saying we just need to eliminate animal agriculture and eat synthetic meat if you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint or whatever, if you grow lab grown meat, that still uses a ton of energy. And then all the animal byproducts that we use for so much stuff, like your leather bag, or, all the collagen you need for everything from
when you were talking about composting all of that stuff, I'm like, oh, that's so valuable. Don't compost all that. The really pretty leather.
Yeah, well,
we need that.
I know, and that's another big issue with the industry. The hide industry completely fell out. It was a little bit before the pandemic, but it used to be when I first got into it when I was 18, I remember the hide guy would come and pay us like $55 for each one of the cattle hides that we salted, and now you have to pay $8 per hide for them to pick them up. And
whoa!
And most of them now are just like, well, then I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to throw it in the dumpster and pay the dump fee because it's cheaper. Same thing because
it is a lot of work. I mean, you guys salted it, sure, but then there's a
whole bunch of steps to make it actually leather. And the same thing with all the guts, that everything in the slaughterhouse that goes to the rendering facility gets turned into, collagen or makeup or dog food or whatever. All that stuff. There used to be a couple places in town that would pay you to take that stuff from you because they were making valuable product out of it. And then it became you had to pay them to come pick it up. And now it's been consolidated down to one company. And so the week after that company, Darling Ingredients, bought up Valley Proteins, the pickup fee, at least for the place I was at the time, went from $80 a week to $250 a week to get picked up overnight.
That the butcher shop had to pay.
They pay the rendering company to come pick up that stuff and take it to the rendering facility. And so what's happening now is a lot of these butcher shops with the hides and the guts, they're just filling a dumpster and taking it to the landfill, which is, that's a double-edged sword of catastrophe there, because you're losing all that nutrient and all that good stuff that would be made into something else. But now it's also going and festering in a landfill and making even more bad gases and taking up space and not going back to the land where it belongs.
Did those companies not see that coming when they started charging more, and then they were undercutting themselves? But the best case scenario is that it gets used, every part of the animal.
Yeah.
And then, selling it, that's great if you can make some money off of it as the butcher, the farmer, whoever's doing that. And then next scenario would be composting. So at least it's making more nutrients or, helping out on the farm. So it's gone to the absolute worst scenario, and that's throwing it in a landfill.
Yeah. And it's just tough because you look at you can take a whole dumpster full of 3 weeks worth of stuff for $100 or something versus, paying $250 every week for them to come pick. No matter how much you send out, it's a per pickup fee. So if you just did one cow and you got one barrel, that's a $250 barrel to go out the door if you want it to go.
I'm thinking of all the companies that I know that do use byproducts. So the composting companies that go out and they get the spent grain from the breweries or the food to compost to make their product. But nobody's actually paying the person producing this product. The breweries are paying people to take it away.
Yeah.
But if that could be made into a product, that should be. The world is on its head, isn't it? It's really wild. People don't see the value in the value chain is just...
Yeah, the whole supply chain
blurred.
Is cobbled together with something that was efficient and robust post World War II. It's those systems just aren't working for us anymore in the long term.
I think we used to be closer to those systems, though. We used to see the systems in our own, communities. You could see all the parts, and it made sense. But now things have been so removed and so disjointed that we don't understand. Many people don't understand the circular part of the circular economy. They don't understand how things fit together. It's really...
Yeah, they said, I think it's less than 2% of the population is directly engaged with agriculture now. Is one of the facts in the history of the meat industry module that we do in our intro to butchery class is, back in the 1800s, Lincoln created the USDA. And back in those times, more than half of the population was directly involved in agriculture, albeit a lot of them were slaves and not working because they wanted to. But people were more connected with their food, whether they were forced to work on the farm or not. Like, people just knew and understood what it took to make food. And now it's like they're so disconnected, and there's so much automation and giant machinery and stuff that people just don't even consider like how anything gets made anymore. You just think like a steak, materializes in the styrofoam package with the plastic around it, and that's how it happens. But I mean, it's a ton of effort and work and everything goes into making that steak. I grew up in Mount Lebanon, actually. My wife's folks, which now are my folks, they live in Butler. Now, I grew up in Mount Lebanon. I was a pretty suburban kid. My granddad moved to Mount Lebanon from West Virginia, from like dirt poor poverty. Like, he had to hunt squirrels for his breakfast in the morning and stuff like that before school. And he just wanted a better life for his family, so he moved to Mount Lebanon. We've always kind of had friends and family that live in West Virginia, and a bunch of farm parties. Like, that was my vacations, growing up. We'd go camping at our friend's farm for a farm party, cookout, barbecue, or whatever. And as far as being like a Mount Lebanon suburbanite, I had a lot of exposure to agriculture and the land and like hillbilly lifestyle that I think gave me a lot more perspective than a lot of like folks that come up in the suburbs. But it's interesting being in this business and being in Mount Lebanon in the suburbs. There's some nights where it's like, running low on time, and it's like, oh God, I gotta pull this trailer and this big truck into my tiny little driveway and like piss off my neighbors and stuff.
How did you start your butchering career?
I was working at a convenience store at the time, and I was dating a girl. We were on and off a lot, and she ended up getting pregnant, and baby was coming, and I was like, well, I think I'm going to be like, the father figure, so I need to make more money than just what I'm making at the convenience store. So she said, hey, this place down the road here in McKeesport is hiring butchers, and I think they were starting at like $12 an hour or something like that, which back in '02 or whatever was pretty good. and so I was like, I'll go check that out, and they hired me right away. My first day there was really surreal. It was like, never had seen 1,500-pound animal like hanging upside down, like bleeding out. It was a halal slaughterhouse too, so like they did the ritual slaughter, which means like they don't shoot it before they cut their throat, and pretty intense. But I learned pretty quick how much of an art there was to it, and I've always had a chip on my shoulder for doing hard shit that nobody else wants to do. Hence the physics, and I play ice hockey too, and I rode my bike all through the Appalachian Mountains with nothing to my name, like no money, and just wanted to see the mountains. And so everybody's like, you're gonna die, dude. And I was like, no way, man, it's America, there's food everywhere. And so I got a job there, and I only worked at that place for maybe like 4 or 5 months, and then I moved to Washington County for a while and worked at a few places there, and then moved back to Pittsburgh. Had some roommates I was living in Greenfield with for a while. And at that time, I was working at Toma's, living in Greenfield, riding my bicycle every day. I'd leave the house. Yeah, I'd leave the house at 4 o'clock in the morning to get there at like 7:30, work a 9-hour day on the kill floor, and then ride my bike back home, eat a whole pizza, drink a half gallon of milk, and fall asleep, and wake up and do it all over again.
Well, for listeners who don't know, Saxonburg is in the suburbs, probably 10 miles from the city.
No, it was 35 miles.
Each way?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking Gibsonia is 10 miles from like Highland Park. So Greenfield's on the far side.
You're not allowed to ride a bike on 28, and Route 8's a death trap on a bike. So,
right on.
I rode actual Saxonburg Boulevard from where you pick it up in Route 8 there. What is that? Etna? No, not Etna.
Yeah, that's Etna.
Yeah, and then just up Saxonburg Boulevard.
And it's very hilly and very windy and very, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, no shoulder.
No.
I can't believe it. Honestly.
No sidewalk, no shoulder, no like 2-lane roads.
Yeah, no, and it was like I had one tiny little blinky light on the back of my bike, and that was it. And there's
it's twitchy just thinking about this because I ride my bike in the city, and that's relatively safe. What? How long did you do that?
I did that for a couple months, and then the winter started coming down on me. There was a couple like times I rode back in a snowstorm, and I was like, this is just not a good idea. So I ended up pitching a tent behind Thoma's for a while, and I stayed there for a winter. I just like lived in the tent back there. And,
did they know you were living there?
Oh yeah, you know, they'd yell back there every morning like, man, time to get up.
Wow.
Pre-cell phone and all that stuff. I didn't have an alarm clock or anything, but
that's great.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I was young, and you know, I just didn't have a care in the world and thought I was a badass. So I was like,
well, I'll just confirm that yes, you were a badass, maybe a little crazy.
Yeah, no, the craziness is always there a little bit.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so then I've just bounced around. I've probably worked at over a dozen different plants throughout my career. And then when I started this company, I worked at a bunch of farms doing the mobile slaughter thing. And then just through like word of mouth, I started getting recommendations from folks that like, hey, I'm building a facility. Can you help me with the design? Like, how high do I have to put the rail system? What kind of equipment do I need to do this many and things like that? So I started like really leaning into the training and consulting part of it. Like this summer, I was all over the place. I was everywhere. I mean, I went out as far as Colorado's Western Slope to Oklahoma, and I've been in New York, Tennessee. And I mean, I got to do a lot of traveling this past year, just going and teaching people the trade. So it's been pretty interesting, but that's it all got started with just as a job though. I had been hunting a couple times with my uncle, but nothing ever really like that involved or serious that I was like, oh, I'm going to make meat processing my career path. It was just got into it as a job, and I'm like, damn, there's a lot of skill to this, and people love it too. And, you know, everybody loves when I come to the party because I'm always bringing good meats or, you know.
Yeah, I bet. When I was in Chatham grad school, food studies, there was a meat class. I didn't take it, but the students went there and witnessed a full processing day, which included the nail, like you said. They shoot them first and then they drain the blood. So it's a lot of death. You got to kill something in order to get meat. Have I ever told you the story about the guy who called me when I worked for the city and he said he wanted to start a chicken barbecue business and he wanted to raise the chickens himself? And he was coming at it saying like, I want to raise all these chickens in the city. What's the zoning code? Yeah. And I was like, first of all, you need do you have a business plan? Yeah,
you just dive into it.
And so he was expecting that he called the city and that the city's going to go, no, you can't produce your own animals and slaughter them or whatever. But, you know, I think a little differently, and that's why I was good at my job at the city. And so I said, well, okay, so how much are you planning on selling? Let's say how many chickens a day? You're not just going to sell wings. They only have 2 wings each. So how many are you planning on selling? And so I think we got to like, let's say 5. Let's say 5 a day. Okay, fine. You're going to sell 5 a day. That means you have to slaughter 5 chickens every day or 25 a week. And so, you know, we slowly did the math. And I was like, so that means that every day or every week or every month, you have to be adding this many chickens and they take this long to harvest the meat chickens because you're going to want meat chickens. You're not going to want scrawny egg layers, whatever. And you're not going to get. And so we're working through this whole thing. Like, I think dude was just like surprised that I went that far with the conversation. Yeah. And so I was like, and then you're going to need a way to get the feathers off, and you're going to, you know, need the cones and all the stuff for the slaughter. And I said, you're not allowed to slaughter in the city, but did not even come up in this, because I'm like, first, the reality of this, you need to
Get
process
your head
this,
wrapped
right?
around the numbers first.
Yeah. And so I was like, so that means you have to kill 5 chickens a day and process that and have that. So that's this many a month, that's this many, or a week, this many a month. And dude's like, oh, okay, y'all get back to you. Never heard from dude again.
Yeah.
The reality of having to kill so many animals, like to consistently supply yourself with that, especially if you're going to start selling it.
Yeah.
Like that's why people didn't eat so much meat before. We've made it so easy now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it speaks to how disconnected people are with like what it really takes. Even like that example, not even thinking like, oh, I'm doing 5 a week, that's 24, or 5 a day, that's 25 a week. What's that look like in my backyard right now? Just with 25. And then you got to like, what's their life
And
cycle?
even if your cousins are going to help you on their property, because you're only allowed so much per property, like
yeah. And when you're doing it at like a small scale and you're not subsidized, chicken is not cheap. Like to buy a real local bird, the input cost to feed the thing plus the processing fee to get it just a whole chicken in a bag, you're already like talking $12 to $15 for a fairly scrawny chicken. And that's the true cost of raising the birds. But like the big corporates, they have so many subsidies and, have set up so many loopholes that they can, get stuff for free or get tax, breaks or whatever that, that's why chicken is so cheap in the grocery store, because they're raising it at such huge volume with so much subsidy
and ultimately someone's paying for it too. Like the farmers are being ripped off and not.
Yeah. And those subsidy is coming out of taxpayer pockets most of the time too. So it's like, you might not be paying that much at the grocery store, but you're paying it, with your fuel tax, because they're not paying fuel tax on those big feedlots. They're just, buying fuel in bulk and probably getting, some kind of tax write-off or rebate for using so much fuel. And
well, now that you said that, it's I wouldn't make the argument, but it could be argued that we're already paying for that cheap chicken, so let's just buy the cheap chicken. But then there's all the other negative impacts of that system that we don't want to contribute to, but we already are regardless because we pay taxes.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah.
So my question for you though is, how do you, speaking of all the death, how do you reckon with that? How do you handle that?
I engage with it pretty intimately because it is a very heavy responsibility, and there are successful deaths and not successful deaths, and my goal is to have 100% successful death for all the animals, and that means like as minimal stress as possible leading them up to it, which is why the on-farm slaughter thing is so great, because like any animal gets so stressed out when you load them on a trailer and bounce them around these roads and potholes and everything else and throw them into a cold, dark slaughterhouse and then run them through the system. They just get a lot of stress hormones in them. But so making sure that they're as stress-free as possible right up to the point, and then having a one shot, one kill effective stun is a must. If they have too much mobility where you can't get a clean shot or whatever, you just don't do it. You get a better setup until you can guarantee that, and just doing everything as methodically and cleanly as possible, and like not attaching a lot of emotion to it one way or the other, whether, because I've worked in plants where, like crazy wild rednecks just love killing stuff, and like they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome or whatever, which is like emotional energy on the wrong end of the spectrum. But then there's also like people who are like, oh, I feel so bad for it or whatever. It's that emotional energy on the other end of the spectrum. I feel like you got to be in the middle ground there where you understand what's happening. But again, if you get into quantum physics and the universe and like where does consciousness originate, whether it's like have you ever heard of materialism versus post-materialism? Like materialism, the fundamental principle is like your brain creates consciousness. because neural impulses and all this stuff create your thought patterns and all that. Post-materialism thought is your consciousness is always there, floating around in the universe, wherever, and your consciousness decided to create a brain and a body, which is like, a lot of people think the brain is like the tuning fork of your spirit or whatever. So it's like your connection to the higher realms or whatnot, and getting a little esoteric. But, you know, in my mind, I feel like every kind of living creature, whether it walks around or is rooted into the ground or whatever, I feel like they, in the realm before they got to here, decided this is the journey that I want to take. And I feel like when you're in that realm before you get to here, you live outside of space and time. So you know exactly what's going to happen the whole way through, but you just, you know, you decide to do it for whatever reason. You want to experience gravity, or you want to be able to experience like emotional swings or like physical affection or whatever. Because I think if you're just like a spirit light body, like you don't have those variables. You're just like everything is everything all the time, and you're just like floating around. But going down the wormhole a little bit on this one. Yeah, so I mean, with that philosophy, I try and say a little prayer and make peace and give thanks before I put anything down, because like anything that has consciousness can feel pain or distress. And it's not just animals. Like there's countless studies out there that show that plants very definitively show emotional response to stimuli. And it doesn't have to be a living thing. Water itself, they've done experiments where like you put a droplet of water here and a droplet of water here, you yell mean, hateful, awful things to the one droplet of water and put it in the freezer, and then you tell the other droplet of water, I love you, you're deserving, all this stuff, and put it in the freezer. The water that you hate speeched will make these crazy deformed crystals that won't be symmetrical and just be like, you know, deformed basically. But the water that you gave love to will create like a fractal geometric symmetrical pattern and everything has water in it. So like I think the water is part of a big medium of your consciousness, but with actually having to, you know, kill something to eat it is, you know, it's a lot of responsibility. So I try and make it as painless and as stress-free as possible, so they have a successful death and they like don't get stuck kind of and don't get to reassimilate back into the universe soup or whatever you want to call it. But bowl and spoon.
How has the trend in urban agriculture and local foods and all of that, how has that influenced? Because, you know, we're not going to grow all the food or produce all the food that we need in an urban environment, but how has that movement affected the work that you do?
I think it's helped like raise awareness and re-engage people with their food, whether it's meat or whatever, because even if you're growing a tiny little postage stamp garden or something, like there's just so much more fulfillment and everything you get from growing your own food. And people get inspired by that and want to find other like wholesomely grown local foods. And I think that trend has helped a lot because people are more engaged and want to know where their food comes from and want to find the best food possible that's raised, you know, ethically and humanely and processed in, you know, a clean way. Then urban agriculture definitely has helped bring that awareness up a couple notches for folks that normally would just be like, oh, my steak materializes in the styrofoam package and that's where it comes from. So, and
I have to imagine that, you know, raising chickens for eggs has got a lot of people either turning off of eating chickens or being like, I'm not eating my chicken, but I now respect the farmers that grow chickens locally and what the care they put into them and how precious that animal was.
Yeah, I think it can give you a little perspective too of like the true cost of those products too, because you're like, oh man, I got to buy feed for these things again. Like, man, this just you can't just like let them loose and they just, you know, eat nothing but, I mean, I guess if you have the right system set up, they can live completely off the land, but it's not. Most of them folks are supplementing them with some kind of grain or
absolutely,
or something
especially
to give them more energy. And,
urban farmers too.
yeah,
Because if you let your chickens go, they'll eat everything else that you don't want them to eat, you want to eat, or that you're growing for flowers or whatever. Like, we didn't have chickens this year for the first time, and stuff came up. We were like, what is happening? We had no idea. We had all these like seeds that the chickens were just like taking, trimming the little sprouts as they came up.
Yeah.
Amaranth and borage.
Okay, I don't think I heard of that one before.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool one. It's a little blue flower, and the flower and the leaves and everything taste kind of cucumbery.
Oh yeah.
Although the leaves are real furry, so you got to be particularly hardcore to eat them.
Yeah, put some furry leaves in your mouth.
Yeah.
I like to just give a promo spot to Unified Fields and Community Kitchen Pittsburgh here, that if you are trying to buy good local meat, we have a meat case here that we sell, beef and pork and chicken, that is all 100% locally sourced, and it's all pretty well competitively priced with the grocery store too. I had a couple people were like, man, this was actually more in the grocery store when I was in there the other day, because we are buying whole carcasses, and we have a lot of help like with students and stuff that can help out too, so it keeps the labor overhead down a little bit. Because this is the thing, a lot of times the local meat is far more expensive than the stuff you get in the grocery store, because of how much it does cost to raise it and everything like that. But there's a lot of work that goes into actually processing the meat, and labor costs a lot of money nowadays. So we can do it efficient, and I've been doing it for so long too that it doesn't take me very long to break stuff down and package it all up to look picture perfect and everything. So
right here in the heart of Hazelwood.
Right here at Community Kitchen Pittsburgh in the cafe, and then we are going to be doing a lot of like public workshops too, where we'll do a hog breakdown, and then a dinner right after it that features cuts from that hog, or doing knife sharpening classes, or sausage making demos and things like that. But trying to get the community and consumers actually engaged in some of that stuff, so they can see how the sausage class was such a blast. We did that a few months ago, and we had I think 25 people came to it, and everybody got to make their own sausage and take home like 3 or 4 pounds of what they made. We had bratwurst and andouille sausage that we had prepared to cook for dinner, a bunch of peppers and onions. It was a good time.
So did you have just a few recipes that people could pick from?
No, I brought the whole spice cabinet out, and I was like, this is what we got. You can make whatever you want. I gave people like the foundation of a base of like how much salt and stuff to put in for how much meat you had. But other than that, I was like, one of the magical things about making sausage is it can be anything. Like, I've made all kinds of wild stuff. It's not just like maple and sage and hot sausage, Italian sausage. I mean, I do like red wine and onion sausage. That smoked andouille sausage was really good. We do chorizo. We do apple maple chicken sausage, and all kinds of different.
Where can people find out about these classes?
Through Community Kitchen Pittsburgh's website, or they can just email or stop in CKP to ask. You can email thebutcher@ckpgh.org, and just if you're on our Instagram or on our newsletter or stuff, we always give a blast out whenever we have a save the date or upcoming event that we need to sell tickets for or whatever.
All right, well, we'll look there.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for your time. This has been fascinating.
Yeah,
and
it was great. We went in all different directions today. Huh?
We did. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley.
With Bowl and Spoon is written, produced and hosted by Shelley Danko Day. Original theme song was written and performed by Paul LeBreeze and friends. You can listen to With Bowl and Spoon wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, review, and share. Follow us and send us questions or messages on Facebook and Instagram at With Bowl and Spoon. Thanks for listening.